PC gaming is expensive to get into. At least that's what I've seen online, and if you know anything about the internet, doesn't lie to you. So that's one of the reasons I've been going around trying to think up different ways to get maybe PC gaming, emulation, console gaming just cheap, because things are expensive. So that's like one of the first things I want to do, cheap. Well, today we're looking at this right here. It looks like a pretty standard office PC until you turn it on, and yep, it's a Steambox episode today, guys. So let me know down below in the comments if you like these sorts of videos where we try to put together cheapo PC builds or find different game systems we can modify and do things with so that you can get a lot of entertainment, hopefully for a smaller amount of money. If you watched my previous emulation PC build, you know one of the easiest ways to get a good base for the system is to leverage the overflowing stock of old office computers that get dumped on eBay every week. I'll be once again using that strategy, but as I was scrolling through some of the usual pickups, I couldn't believe a listing that popped up. On its surface, it looks pretty straightforward. It's an HP Elite Desk 705 G4 with a Ryzen 5 Pro 2400. Oh, and 16 gigabytes of RAM. Not a bad system for the $100 price. However, when I looked over the image, I noticed something. Yeah, this thing has a video card installed. Now, some of these Elite desks did have them, but I noticed it because when I'm going through the pictures here, I saw the top was ventilated, and then here you can see two fans. And it gets better. They decided to open it up and just show the video card there on the right side. So I was blown away when I was scrolling through and just happened across this. While most of these mini office PCs rely on their integrated graphics from Intel or AMD, there were some that had dedicated video cards. These were proprietary to that form factor and manufacturer. And HP was one of those companies, and in this case, managed to cram an RX 560 complete with DisplayPort out inside this little office computer. Usually these cards can go upwards of $80 on their own, so this was a no-brainer buy. This account had a few of these listed, and I suspect they'll be going pretty quick once people realize what's here. After a few days, it showed up in the mail, and for the most part, looks to be in pretty good shape. There's plenty of USB ports with 2 Type A and 1 Type C on the front, and another 4 on the back. Unfortunately, there's no HDMI, so I'll have to use a DisplayPort to HDMI to convert over for my TV. Now, there are 2 drawbacks to the listing that I'll need to address real fast, with one being the storage and the other being the power supply. Easy enough to open the system with a single screw on the back and a quick slide. The top comes off, giving us a look at the internals. Pretty clean system with no obvious dust anywhere. I'll be dropping in a 1 terabyte NVMe, and to get to the slot on the board, the video card needs to come out. It's not held in by any screws, and it just lifts up. You can see the single white connector on the board that interfaces with the card. This stacking setup is basically required with the limited space that's available here for this to fit. With the video card removed, we have our slot for the NVMe to drop in, and looks like the PC already has a wireless card installed, so that'll make things a lot easier later on. I did want to take a quick look around the RX 560 just to make sure the thermal compound isn't dry and that the fans look okay. Didn't take much with a few Phillips head screws to remove the fan and then the heatsink. No obvious obstructions or issues here, and the compound on the chip even looks fresh, so eBay's making my job easy today. Even the CPU compound looks fresh, so someone must have gone in and cleaned the system up before sale, and I'm certainly not complaining. That's all I really need to do for the inside of this mini PC. Now let's talk about the power adapter. Normally, I say to try and get an adapter with a mini PC when you buy it, but this deal was just too good to pass up, and I figured finding an adapter to match wouldn't blow up the budget. The power requirements are a bit higher than normal due to the RX 560, and looking on the bottom, that shows 19.5 volt, 7.69 amps required for full use. I managed to find a 150 watt charger on Amazon that covered that at $40. It's a more expensive charger, but this isn't a low-powered system like other mini PCs, so it's understandable. I wouldn't recommend cheaping out on a charger when you're dealing with this sort of power draw anyway. Outside of potential safety issues, you can also run into throttling if the charger can't keep up. Otherwise, that's about it. The mini gaming PC, it's ready for action. Well, almost. So we need to pick an OS, and I decided to go with Bazzite, mostly because with that RX 560, it does make this computer compatible with the sort of the big screen home theater picture for it. And that's something that I was pretty excited to see. And if you're familiar with, like, if you have a Steam Deck, this is going to look like the menu you're used to navigating around. As I say, that Bazzite is designed for Linux newcomers and enthusiasts alike, with Steam pre-installed HDR and VRR support, improved CPU schedulers for responsive gameplay, and numerous community developed tools and tweaks to streamline your gaming and streaming experience. Here, the biggest thing though is This should work really well on a big TV with a controller in hand. And that was pretty much the idea from the start. Make a little console box that can take advantage of all the cool features of PC gaming. Now, in order to do this, you do have to pick the hardware, and it'll kind of walk you through how to do this. So if we go here, well, I wanted home theater PC. You can do like a desktop and stuff. But again, the idea was it's going to be in a home theater setting. And as long as you have RX 400 or up, which I have the 560, you'll be good to go. You can also use an NVIDIA RTX, the GTX 1600 and up, or some of the Intel Arc cards. So that choosing the RX 400 there for the 560. And then I just went with this like Steam OS's desktop. It'll then give you this 8 gigabyte or so ISO file, and you're good to go. After going through a pretty easy install process of booting from the USB, wiping the 1 terabyte NVMe, and letting Bazzite set things up, I was dumped to a familiar looking menu. This is exactly what I was looking for, a Steam Deck-like interface that would fit nicely into a living room setting. See, Windows can work, of course, but it's still really clunky and calls for a keyboard and mouse way too often. Microsoft is working to establish Windows as more of a controller-friendly interface for gaming, but right now, Valve just seems to have the lead. I really didn't have to do much else here to get things ready. Drivers and other backend stuff took care of itself, so I just let updates for the OS run, and that was basically it. While we're not limited to Steam, since you can run emulators in desktop mode along with other launchers, I wanted to stick in game OS mode to see how things could look for a Valve console. I did a quick sign-in for Steam and started downloading a bunch of games from the old days. And look, I know usually people would benchmark these systems with games like Counter-Strike, Fortnite, Minecraft, Dota, but that's not really the direction I was interested in going here. Instead, it's going to be those games I remember from back in the Xbox 360 era to see if we can get a solid experience, certainly at higher resolution and frame rates than what we were dealing with on console at the time. Now, I do have realistic expectations for this build. It's about a $200 system, and it's not cutting edge in terms of the technology in it. So when I think of this and some of the games from that generation, I go 1080p 60 is well above what I experienced a lot of these games on the Xbox 360 back then, and I think should be a good target for this sort of a build with that budget in mind. So here's the experience from a cold boot, when you just walk in the room and press the power button. Remember, I was looking for something that felt at home in the living room next to other game consoles, so part of that is the ease of use and booting to a nice interface with no real intervention from the user. Bazzite does a solid job of this, as you can see. For the controller, I decided to go with this nice looking red Xbox Series wireless controller. Figured it matches up to the AMD equipped PC, and since HP already had Bluetooth on board, it was pretty easy to sync it up with SteamOS, even changing inputs on the fly in menus and games to match. I'll have a box with system information at the top left as I go through a bunch of different games that I installed, so you can see any frame rate fluctuations as we jump around. Each game you'll see I set to 1080p and went with a mix of mostly medium settings. Some games were able to just outright do the highest settings, but those were on the older end, even from my selection of games, such as Half-Life 2. Awesome game, of course, and if you haven't played it, this is a great way to do that with the game running steady well above 60 FPS. Metal Gear Solid 5 bounced around in the 50s for frame rate with medium settings. It's a pretty well optimized game from what I remember, and even ran on the Xbox 360 and PS3 at the end of that generation. Of course, I was really happy to see Master Chief Collection run well here. I moved the settings all around to see how it would handle classic or enhanced graphics, but I never really saw issues with 60 FPS being the normal mark across multiple campaigns and multiplayer matches. Awesome collection, by the way, on Steam. Put together a little PC like this and you'll basically have a Halo box that covers you for all the good ones. A viewer mentioned that Batman Arkham Origins is their Christmas season game, so I figured, why not fire that up to get in the holiday spirit? I was a little concerned going into it since it doesn't have controller support apparently, at least according to the SteamOS listing. I noticed this happens for many different games where it looks like it won't work, but then is able to still start up and play fine, and that's what I saw with Origins. No issues with the Xbox controller, and it was hanging well above the 60 FPS mark the whole time. Max Payne 3 is a game that still looks awesome to this day, but had its limitations on the Xbox 360, namely the frame rate. In the busier settings like the nightclub here, I noticed the game dipping into the 50s, but for the most part did hold above 60 FPS. The bullet damage, though, looks crazy still in this game. It has that Rockstar attention to detail depending on where you shoot the enemies. And as I go along here, for the most part, a lot of the games I was looking to play from this era were performing great, so I think at this point it'd be easier just to mention games that I had issues with to save time. Deus Ex Human Revolution had this weird stuttering thing going on when walking through the city area, and it was really noticeable. It would sort of grab your camera for a second when you would look around and could throw off the entire experience. Not sure if this is a CPU thing, since I'm not exactly rolling with the most powerful Ryzen chip here. Splinter Cell Conviction couldn't seem to figure out what controller I was using, and just seemed to randomize button placements to where start was right trigger and A was B. Also didn't run great, which was weird considering I wasn't really pushing it with high settings at all. Oh, and don't get me started on the Final Fantasy 13 port. I didn't even record footage because I uninstalled it so fast when testing in the living room. It has a lot of work done by the community, but Square Enix really should be more embarrassed about this port. Rise of the Tomb Raider was a struggle for this PC, and it's hard to blame it when the game does use a lot of advanced features that would really be shown off on Xbox One. I would say this was one of the more impressive games to release on the Xbox 360 back then, and hitting 60 FPS is pretty difficult here unless you really start cutting back on some of the more important graphical options. I would also occasionally have to deal with pop-up windows that didn't fit in the Steam OS for game launchers or settings menus. These are older games that didn't always have their advanced settings built in the in-game menus, so you deal with setting your resolution and lighting sometimes before the game would launch. Unfortunately, this can look really bad and sometimes unusable with a controller, and the keyboard and mouse just have to come out. There is a way to use the on-screen mouse controls by holding the Xbox button and moving the right stick, but even that just wouldn't work at times. Oh, and waiting for shaders to compile, sometimes at random, was annoying, especially when it took 10 to 15 minutes or longer. This didn't happen every time you opened a game, mostly on the first launch or if there was an update of some kind, but it was pretty frustrating going to jump into a game only enough to sit there watching this little percentage fill up. Being able to turn the system on with a controller would be a nice plus as well. I've seen people mention this on different forums, and some have found ways to do it, but it isn't super intuitive most times. Maybe I'll look into this a bit more and see what I can come up with. All of that said, this little Steam box turned out great. 90% of the games I was looking to play were able to hit 1080p at 60 FPS, and looked good doing so. The console-like experience with SteamOS, however, is probably the biggest takeaway here. It really looks like Valve has something with it. Now, there is work to be done, but we still need to see an official offering from Valve, maybe with their own new age Steam console before the OS can be judged too harshly. As it stands now, you can indeed turn the PC on, pick up a controller, and by the time you sit down on the couch, be ready to navigate around an interface that works well for the living room. I have a few other ideas for different builds, since I know this won't necessarily be available all the time online, and I think we can actually get this thing a little cheaper. That by going to a slightly larger design, so let me know if you want to see another type of Steam box build with different parts. Thanks everyone for watching, and I'll see you next time.